Renaissance Map Colorists. The workshop smelled of parchment and paint, a mingling of stretched vellum, boiled glue, and the sharp sweetness of ground pigments. Light poured through tall windows, dust motes turning golden as they swirled above the wooden tables. It was Florence in the late 15th century, when the Renaissance bloomed not only in cathedrals and canvases, but also upon the fragile sheets of maps. Here, in a small room tucked behind the bookseller's street, worked the map colorists. Their craft was quiet, almost hidden. They were not celebrated like painters or sculptors, yet their touch brought the world to life. Oceans deepened to sapphire, mountains brushed in green and brown, kingdoms rimmed with crimson borders. Without their colors, maps were bare bones. With them, maps breathed. This is the story of Alessio, a young apprentice, and Master Bartolomeo, an aged colorist who had painted the world many times without leaving Florence. The apprentice arrives. Alessio had come to the workshop at the age of 14, carrying nothing but a satchel of brushes and more hope than skill. His father had been a tailor, but the boy's hands longed for paint, not needle. On his first morning, he found Master Bartolomeo hunched over a great map spread across the table. The old man's beard was gray, his fingers stained with vermilion and ochre. He lifted his head and peered at the boy. "You are here to learn?" "Yes, master." "Then understand this. You may never see the lands you color. You will not cross the seas you paint, nor climb the mountains you shade. Yet you must make them live, as if you had walked them with your own feet. Can you do that?" Alessio swallowed and nodded. "Good," said Bartolomeo. "Then fetch water. The world waits to be painted." The art of color. The maps arrived from engravers and cartographers, sheets etched with fine black lines, rivers winding like veins, cities marked with tiny towers, seas stippled with dots. To the uncolored eye, they were impressive but lifeless. That was where the colorist began. Bartolomeo showed Alessio how to grind pigments from stone and plant, azurite for the sea, verdigris for forests, saffron and ochre for deserts. He showed him how to bind them with gum arabic, how to test each mixture on scraps before laying them on parchment. "Do not flood the paper," the master warned. "Maps are bones. Too much paint and you bury them. Too little and they lie pale. You must find the breath between." They painted in silence for hours, the scratch of brushes mingling with the distant bells of Florence. Alessio learned to shade mountains with a touch of brown at their roots, to brighten rivers with glints of silver, to rim far-off lands in gold leaf, so that merchants and princes could dream of riches there. Customers of many kinds. The workshop door opened often. A nobleman came, ordering a map of the Holy Land for his chapel wall. A ship captain came, demanding bright coasts for a chart he would carry to Lisbon. A young scholar came, eager for a colored map of the heavens, where stars blazed not only white, but red and blue. Each customer wanted the world in their own way. Bartolomeo bowed, nodded, and colored accordingly. "Maps are not truth," he told Alessio once. When the boy asked why Africa was painted green in one copy and sandy gold in another, they are mirrors for the buyer's desire. Our duty is not to judge, but to give color to dreams. The secret of the sea. One evening, Alessio watched Bartolomeo at work long after the other apprentices had gone. The old man was painting the sea on a Venetian chart. Instead of plain blue, he laid down layers, pale wash for the shallow waters, deeper cobalt for the mid-sea, and, at last, rich ultramarine for the farthest deeps. Then, with a flick of white, he touched foam upon the edges of drawn ships. The sea seemed to move. "How did you learn this?" Alessio whispered. Bartolomeo smiled faintly. "From sailors' tales. They tell of waters that change with depth, of waves that carry light. A map without a living sea is no map at all." From that night, Alessio painted water with reverence, as though he were blessing it. Rivalries and shadows. Not all admired the colorists. Some cartographers grumbled that paint obscured their careful lines. Some scholars sneered, saying color was decoration, not knowledge. Worse still were rival workshops. One across the Arno boasted brighter hues, though Bartolomeo muttered they used false mixtures that would fade within a year. Customers often chose brightness over truth, and orders dwindled. "Remember, boy," Bartolomeo said, "we do not compete with noise. We work for time. 100 years hence, when their maps fade to gray, ours will still hold the sea's blue and the forest green." A journey without moving. Years passed. Alessio grew taller, his stroke steadier, his colors more sure. Through the maps, he traveled the world without leaving Florence. He painted Cathay with golden mountains, though he had never seen silk or jade. He shaded the coast of Africa, listening to merchants whisper of elephants and pepper. He traced the islands of the New World, barely known, their shapes guessed more than measured. At night, he dreamed of ships and horizons, though by day his feet never left the cobblestones. "Do you never wish to go?" Alessio asked Bartolomeo once. "To see with your own eyes the places we paint." The old man looked at him for a long time. "I have traveled farther with my brush than any sailor with his ship. The sea ends. The brush does not." A map for a prince. One spring, a great commission came. A map of the entire world, colored for Lorenzo's library in Florence. It would be vast, painted on sheets joined together, rimmed in gold, filled with sea monsters, banners, and coats of arms. The workshop worked for months. Alessio painted the western oceans, deep and shifting. Bartolomeo handled the east, laying deserts in saffron and mountains in gray-green. Together, they built a world, inch by inch, until the parchment shone like a jewel. When it was finished, the prince himself came to see it. He bent over the map, his rings glinting in the candlelight, and he smiled. "Here is the world as I wish to see it," he said. "Alive, rich, endless." He paid handsomely, and the workshop flourished again. The master's end. Time, however, is stronger than craft. Bartolomeo's hands grew shaky, his sight dim. At last he set down his brush. "It is your turn now, Alessio," he said. "You will paint the world after me. Remember, the map is not only lines, but breath. Color is not paint, it is life." A year later, Bartolomeo died. Alessio painted a small map of the heavens for his master's burial. Stars touched with gold, as if to light his way. The legacy of color. Alessio took the workshop as his own. Apprentices came, as he once had, bringing brushes and hope. He taught them to grind stone to powder, to shade the seas, to honor both truth and dream. And so, though Alessio never left Florence, he colored the world again and again. Merchants carried his maps on voyages. Scholars hung them in studies. Princes placed them in palaces. His colors crossed oceans, even when he did not. Centuries later, when time faded the parchment and edges frayed, still his seas glowed blue, his forests green, his deserts gold. And though his name was not carved in marble, it lingered in color on maps that carried the Renaissance world into memory. Closing. This was the life of the Renaissance Map Colorists, quiet artisans, half forgotten, who gave shape not to stone or canvas, but to imagination itself. They painted the world for those who longed to see it. And in their colors, the Renaissance learned to dream. And so, when you look at an old map today and see a sea bluer than the ink alone could show, or a mountain shaded with life, remember them. Remember Bartolomeo, Alessio, and all those who traveled the world without ever leaving their wooden tables. For sometimes the greatest journeys are made not by ships, but by brushstrokes.